Hello everybody and welcome to Node.js and JavaScript. I of course am Gray Lewis as always, and today we're going to be covering classes and really how we can use object-oriented programming concepts in JavaScript. So the interesting thing about JavaScript is that under the hood most data structures are actually objects. And so what do we mean by an object? We just mean a collection of properties and values. And the interesting thing is that those values can actually be almost anything, right? They can be a method, meaning a function. They can be a string. They can be an array. They can even be an object in and of themselves, right? So that makes it kind of interesting to compare objects and classes, because if any of you have worked in an object-oriented language before, like Java, you'll know that classes are sort of the basis for organizing code. And it actually sounds kind of similar to this notion of an object. But what we'll see is that in JavaScript, we can use some special syntax to allow for object-oriented like functionality, which means that we're able to create new objects from a template called a class. So let's go ahead and define a class. The syntax for defining a class goes pretty much like this. We go class, then shape1, and then the brackets, somewhat similar to a functional declaration. And then we're able to add properties to that class like this. So we've just added a property, meaning that if we access, an object made from that shape, and then we went shape1.type, we would be able to get back this value of square, right? And then additionally, we're going to put in a constructor function. And this is really the key of how classes work. They're going to take a, when you initialize a instance of a class, it's going to take some parameters. And in this case, the only parameter we need is the side length, because it's a square, right? So all the sides will be the same length. And then what we'll do is we can actually dynamically set the properties of this class based on this or these, depending on how many parameters you have, from within the constructor. So basically, we're able to define how this class is determined based on a few key inputs, right? So for example, we could create an equivalent class, but for rectangles. And you can sort of see how we can use this constructor creatively. So instead of just accepting side length here, we can accept height and width. And then similarly, we'll just go ahead and apply those two properties on the object. So what's interesting here is we can see that we can sort of define how a schematic, if you will, for creating objects based on as few or as many pieces of data as we want. So that means that now creating a new instance of shape1 is as simple as going square equals new shape1 6,4. And so now we've created an entire object in just one line of code, right? So you can see how that's kind of powerful. And then let's go ahead and explore what the console logs look like here. And I mean, I think it'll be pretty expected, right? First, we're going to, as I said before, create a new instance of this class. Then we're going to console log its type property, and then we're going to console log its width and height properties. So let's go ahead and run index.js now. Oh, little typo there. Let's try that again. And there we go. We see it printing exactly what we'd expect: square and width 64, height 64. And that 64 is just determined by this one input here. And then similarly, we could do the same thing here. Rectangle equals new shape 2 with 10 and 20. And then we can console log the width and height similarly. So you can see kind of what this does. But interestingly, we actually don't have much functionality difference between classes and objects. You can really just think of the object-oriented or class-based syntax for creating objects in JavaScript as sort of just a tool, right? So we're probably not going to actually primarily think of our code as being organized into classes. Or if we do, such as in a React application, we're still not really necessarily taking full advantage of object-oriented programming. But we're able to take some of the patterns, some of the basic advantages of object-oriented programming and sort of finagle, use them in a new context using this syntax in JavaScript. All right, so I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or any misunderstandings, please don't hesitate to leave some questions on the Eduonix website. To summarize, today we covered what classes are in general and how they function in JavaScript. We covered how to set up a constructor within those classes, and we also covered how to initialize an instance of a class. All right, so that's all I have for you today. With that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.